Hello, everyone. We are here with another Codurance Fireside Chat. Today, the topic for today was inspired by a comment left by Jürgen Desmet. I hope that I pronounced his name properly. So, in the previous episode, we discussed if it was possible to bring Agile and developers back together. And one of the comments that Jürgen left to us, he was also mentioning that one of the reasons might be that developers want to specialize themselves into certain technical areas. And for that, they might not be interested potentially in other areas. So I'm Sandro Mancuso. I'm here with Mashooq and José from Codurance. And today we are going to be discussing to specialize or not to specialize. So should we become generalists? Should we become specialists? So in terms of software delivery teams, what do you guys think?
Well, I'll start. I get the ball rolling. So I don't see anything wrong with specializing. I think like everything else, it has its place. And it's a matter of where in the context that fits, right? And there's this idea of let's say T-shaped profiles. People who are if you look at all of the skills that the profile can have, like they know a little bit about a lot of stuff, and then they're really really good at one particular thing, or P-shaped, like with more than one, or M-shaped, right? And I feel that really depends, on the context. Now, if you're talking to a doctor or a surgeon, you probably want them to be really, really specialized on that one thing that they're going to be doing, but if you're, if you're having to deal with something else, that you may having a broader view on things, may be more interesting. So I personally don't feel like that's a bad thing. I do feel that maybe and this is related to the previous thing. People do like specializing, and that may be an issue when you're only focused on one thing and you lose sight of the whole. I feel like that is what causes the problem. No, I don't know, Mash, what do you think?
So my personal view is that specialism is it's what you really need to understand is when you talked about the T shape, the thing that you go deep in, right? How do you define that? How do you define the width of the thing that you will go deep in, right? Because in some cases, people take too narrow of a specialism, right? Now, let's before kind of test-driven development was a quite a fairly common practice. I know it's still not that common, but people thought that writing tests was actually not their job. Developers thought that writing automated tests in particular was not their job. So they were specializing in writing production code only and not testing code. Now that's what I mean by the width of it. The other aspect of developing is, and you can take this, it's a very blurred boundary, right? You can take this to like, what's business analysis? Is, I am, as a developer, I'm trying to understand what I need to build and how. So does that mean that I shouldn't be doing this and someone should just tell me, because I'm a specialist developer, I am not a business analyst. So I shouldn't really be looking to fully understand exactly what I'm building, right? So I think looking at specialism purely from a development point of view, I think there is a dysfunction where people narrow the scope too much for their specialism. But then there are other aspects where I see that specialism is actually a very good thing. I've met people like an art director, basically like a graphic designer who is involved. And, you will always get some generalists who could do a bit of UI, that kind of thing. But when you get an art director to really do that, there is a big difference, and they can't do anything else. But I'm sure they have other aspects that they kind of generalize in as well. But their specialism is, I see it very valuable. So that's what my point of view is, that you really have to be very careful on what you define specialism as, because you can make it too narrow.
Sorry, before you go, Sandro. So there's also this aspect of economies of scale as well, right? Like there is an aspect of maybe you can get someone who's really good at a lot of things, right? But that doesn't really scale, right, for your organization or whatever. And I feel like that's also an aspect from the point of view of the organization. You're not looking for the one man band kind of thing. No, most of the time where they can perform really, really well in lots of different areas, right? And to some extent, the whole system, even the education system, has kind of adapted to fulfill that factory mindset, where you have people who are really good at, and you look at this with, if you look at data science, or you look at, there are certain topics that they are so deep that, you really need to invest, thousands of hours just to get a decent at them, right? I'm not talking about writing papers on what's coming up next, but just being able to perform well. So I feel like that's an aspect that by design is there, right? And it's not inherently bad. No, it's what makes the system kind of scale, right? Sorry, Sandro, yeah.
No, that's fine, because there is so much to talk about here. I want to bring a slightly different perspective, or maybe try to, how can I say, detach two different topics here. One is a personal satisfaction. So we are very fortunate people normally, because we can do what we like, and we can have a good living out of what we do. So normally when we join our industry, there were a few things that attracted us to our industry, right? So there is a personal side to it. So for example, I tend to study more, or to go deeper into subjects that I'm more interested. So this is a very personal approach to a specialization, because I normally like to dedicate my time. And when I say I'm talking about many other people as well, many other professionals, that they have pleasure in learning and going deeper into certain subjects. And by that, as a side effect, they become more specialized in there. And then there is the other aspect, is how those professionals, they coexist in an organization. So for example, if you need to assemble a team, or you need to manage a department, or achieve a goal, an organizational goal, how do you combine all those different professionals? And that's when, for example, some organizations try different approaches. Some of them are pushing people to become cross-functional people. So normally they were trying to achieve cross-functional teams. But in order to achieve cross-functional teams, they end up pushing the individuals of those teams to go broader, to start taking many different tasks that the team is responsible for, almost like pushing people to be cross-functional people and not cross-functional teams. And this is where, for me, sometimes we have some conflict. Because on one hand, you have your personal desires, your personal, how can I say, the things that you are interested, you would like to do, that where you would like to spend most of your time doing those things. And then there are the other things that you need to do. And I think that, of course, in order for you to collaborate with the team, you need to have a certain degree of overlap. And that's where probably the T-shape comes into play, because you have enough breadth so that you can interact with other people and understand, have a common, how can I say, establish a common goal or a common vocabulary or stuff, so that we can coexist. But when you are pushed to do too many other things away from what you like to do, that's where a problem arises.
I take a slightly different view from a more. So what you like to do, there's a personal view and there's a team view, right? So what you like to do as an individual and what needs to be done, right? There are a bit different. You can generalize people too much. So I think that, this cross-functional people versus cross-functional team, maybe there is I find the boundary a bit too strong, describing it in that way. What I would say is that, everyone likes to do certain things. Some things in their job are more, let's say, interesting, and other things are less interesting, right? So if we take a view on purely let's say a selfish view, let's say that, things that I like to do and things that I don't like to do, and then I only do the things that I like, that is more of a selfish view. But then taking it on the other end, like if I'm completely selfless and I'm doing everything, then I am spread too thin as well, right? So to me, it seems like there is a spectrum, and there is a core set of things. Each role, let's say the role of a developer, the role of an analyst, there are a core set of things each role should be doing. And I feel that it's not just as simple as generalizing specialist. It's not that I'm specializing in this and I generalize in this and someone else specializes in the thing that I generalize. I think an effective team has quite a strong overlap amongst its members on the things that they are specializing in, right? But also has areas that they diverge at in terms of their skills.
But teams are also fluid, right? And by the way, I'm kind of doing a bit of a devil's advocate here, right? So just want to be very clear here. So because of course I also understand that we need to, like you are a professional, you need to do what needs to be done and stuff. So you are not in a professional environment, you're paid to do a job, right? So, but there is for example, you mentioned business analysts. Let's take that as an example, right? So I see that the role of developer is in a constant expansion. Yeah. So for the business analysis is a very interesting one because yes, on one hand, you really need to understand what we need to do. So you need to speak to your product owners. You need to go deep into the requirements. You need to see what is the acceptance criteria. You need to see the impact and so on and so forth. We need to do some planning for that. You need to do some analysis and stuff like that. But how far do you go in that capacity? For example, let's say if you are working a more traditional agile process, you focus on your next iteration and you just like focus on the top of the backlog, and then you do analysis in what needs to be done immediately next, or you are gonna stop writing code altogether and you're gonna just doing business analysis with the business people to create a strategy for the product and just to generate the user stories at a high level, or just understand what needs to be changed in each system. For example, if you're doing more a technical business analysis, but just to provide that information so that someone will actually do the change. See what I'm saying? So there is also a spectrum of business analysis, and all of a sudden you might be doing just enough so that you can use your specialization as a developer to implement that, or you might be completely far off where you do a lot of analysis, but you are not using your specialization as a developer. See where I'm coming from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel that this kind of spectrum is actually unique, where for each different combination of roles, the way I see it is, the relationship between the role of a business analyst and the role of a developer, right? How much do they overlap? The relationship between a business analyst and, let's say, a tester, right? How do they overlap, and what kind of, and each one of those, there is almost like a relationship between them, and the level of overlap that is actually quite good. And at what point do you then start finding yourself that you are stretching? Like from a business developer, business analyst, I think there is quite a strong overlap. But a developer, unless, as I mentioned, the example of an art director, there might be a very little overlap. Right. And that's why I think it's quite a complex question, isn't it, about whether what you specialize in, and where you are a generalist, and where you actually have very, just simple awareness but very little else.
Okay, yes, there is that capability part, right? Like you may not have the skill at all to do things, but what I find is that a lot of the time is also about attitude. It's not so much about the skill, because the skill in many cases you can build, right? Like it's not, if it is within the range of let's say the area where you specialize or whatever, right? Like you were saying before, no, I only write production code. I'm not going to care about the tests, no, or I'm not going to care about infrastructure, or I'm not going to care about whatever, right? So there is an aspect there of the willingness to have that overlap more than the capacity to have the overlap. And I feel like that is a key factor for a team to be successful. It's not just about which, capabilities or skill individuals have, but also the idea that we are all in this together, right? And we're all trying to contribute. And some people will be able to contribute more or less, or, depending on the task. But that's a key factor. And it to some extent, going back to Jürgen's point, in his comment, it's about not wanting to contribute, not wanting to get out of my specialty or my, what I've been studying all of this time, right? Or because, and there are other things to that, because to be able to do that is getting out of your comfort zone in many regards, right? There is this aspect of starting again the learning journey, and going through those steps of feeling inadequate, and like slowly building up, and then starting to master a little bit more, and so on. And not everyone wants to go through that, right? And you find it in people who I don't know, like they have a strong foundation, but then maybe they go to a project and they need to learn a different language. It might not be a complete step away, right? It may be something that is close to, I don't know, if it's Java that maybe you're having to learn Kotlin, or you're having to learn Scala or something like that, in the sense that it won't be a huge gap in knowledge. But still, people don't want to take that trip, or don't want to take that trip often, and I feel attitude is an important aspect, when we're talking about this.
That's a very, very interesting point, Jose. Is we were just talking about generalization and specializations across roles, but actually specializations exist within the role as well. As you mentioned, I'm a Java developer, I'm a C# .NET developer, and so on. And yeah, you get people. I think things are, from what we see, at least, things are improving. And especially, in our company, we positively encourage. And in fact, I find it very refreshing that almost everybody in our company is more than eager to look at a different language. But going back in my own career, I've known so many people who will identify themselves. I'm a Java developer. I don't develop in anything else. If I have to do a bit of scripting, I don't do scripting. I'm a Java developer, or I don't do HTML and JavaScript. That's the front end person's job. And that I find is again, there is a spectrum there, but I think there the overlap should be much, much bigger. Of course, you get people specializing in certain areas even there, but the overlap should be much, much bigger within a role, because that's tool level specialization, right?
Yeah, there are what I was thinking about, neighboring skills, right? So you have the skills that you want to specialize, the ones that you enjoy using and learning, and then there are the neighboring ones, and then you start going outwards, and then you start finding other neighborhoods in a way in terms of skills, right? So there is a personal attitude, which I also agree. I think that you become far more effective the broader you learn. The whole T-shaped kind of thing. Like there are areas that you are really good at, that you specialize, but you understand enough about all the neighboring skills given the context that you are in. You understand them well enough to contribute very well to the teams, or even step up if one of your team members is not available for whatever reason, and so on and so forth, right? So that's very good. And the more you understand about the other areas, the neighboring areas, the easier it will be for you to collaborate and create ideas and co-create even solutions and stuff like that. So I think I totally understand that. But how far do we go? Because this is, for me, an interesting question. Because as Mash said, at the beginning, developers would write code. And then there was a push for them to start doing testing and then automating their test. And then there is a push for them to do business analysis and help with the user stories. And then there is a push for them to do operations and start automating stuff. And then they need to understand cloud. They need to understand the user journey. They need to understand more about the business domain. They understand. So how far do we go? Because like at some point, if developers are being pushed, spreading themselves too thin, and they are spending their time, and again, I'm trying to do a devil's advocate in here, right? So, but if you try to spread yourself too thin, you don't have a lot of time to specialize, right? Because now you are spending a lot of your time trying to learn other things and cross. So you spend less time doing that. And as more and more people do that, because we also have seen teams that they push to be cross-functional, teams of cross-functional people, where they were very bland teams. They were not doing anything exciting. They were not innovating. They were not, they were just like, they could not do anything in depth. Nothing complicated or that needed innovation, that needs a lot of creativity would end up going there because there was not enough specialists to go deeper. And if you look at a lot of the technologies, a lot of evolutions we have in our industry, yes, there were some of them that were a combination of people that they created interesting businesses, but a lot of technologies that we use today came from the deep specialists. So I'm still a bit like the expectations that we have from developers today. Sometimes I wonder if it's we expect too much of them. And that's another point that I had. Sorry for taking too much time to put my point. But like, as we are asking developers, other professionals to start going too deep in other areas as well, they end up doing a job that is half-arsed in a way, because, for example, they are not very good at testing. They're not very good at business analysts. They might not be very good at project management or engagement management or UX. And all of a sudden, because it's their expectation for them to do that job, we end up not using a specialist in all those areas, and we end up with a half-arsed job everywhere, including in the development area, because the developers are spending far less time developing.
So yeah, I think it's a very good point. There are two ways to remedy that. You got two extremes. We are talking about an extreme of everyone's a generalist, and the other extreme of everybody is a specialist. And I'm now thinking about the kind of the team level, right? And at that team level, the happy medium is that you've got a good bunch of specialists, maybe a few good generalists. So there's a good balance at the team level. But at that level, there is one key area that Jose mentioned, is the attitude of, when you are a specialist, for you to not then sit in your silo and think, feed me the stuff that I am a specialist at, and I am not going to take part in other aspects because it's not my job, right? So that attitude actually hurts the team. But on the other hand, if you have a good attitude towards it, where you are actually saying, okay, I specialize in certain things, not only I will do those things, but I will also advise and teach others to be able to do. But also at the same time, I'm going to be very interested in what other people do, even though I can't do it as well as them, but I'm very interested in them. And it creates a good dynamic, right? And by that very nature, it will allow that specialist to start building up general areas where they are not just, they're kind of moving from awareness to actually kind of, beginner, advanced beginner, those kind of things, yet still specializing in certain areas. So I think in this kind of thing, my view is that it's okay to specialize. It's fine to specialize, and we need specialists, but the attitude must be there that you are working in a very cooperative way, and you are getting your hands dirty, as it were, with all the other things that need to happen, and not just standing apart.
I feel like it's also a matter, like if you look at it, individual as an individual, no, like in a selfish point of view, it also makes you more valuable to the team, valuable to the organization as well, and it allows you to do your job better as well, right? So understanding how everything works allows you to do a better job in whatever it is that you are specializing. And there's another aspect of that, which is by looking outside, you can also bring in new ideas to what you're doing and complement what you're doing, and continue expanding on that specialty, right? So there's definitely lots of benefits from something like that, right? Like the keeping, okay, you want to specialize, but you keep a broad view, right? Like there's more things out there. You still want to know how certain things work, maybe not get into the same level of specialty, but you do want to be aware of what is happening so that you can cross pollinize, if you will. And I feel that's a very important aspect, because even when you are learning new things within the specialty, the way that you learn is connecting other ideas, or connecting, and the more the broader that your ideas are, to some extent, the easier it is to connect those concepts, right? And I feel that will help you anyway. And whether you want to go down the generalist route or you want to go to the specialist route, it will help you anyway. So there is a case for looking outside of the specialty one way or another, right?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because in principle I agree, and I was just thinking if there are exceptions to that, and also if your attitude towards becoming a specialist, that you are, I wouldn't say that, I'll put in a very blunt way. I think that's someone that says, look, this is my job and all those things are not my job. I don't like that attitude. I don't think it's a professional attitude. I think that you are there to do your job, but also doing your job means collaborating with others, achieving a bigger goal than your individual goals, right? So I just want to make it very clear. But there is I wonder if there are exceptions to what you just said, Jose, and also if the attitude that you have in terms of guiding your career, and we talked about that in one of the previous Fire Chat episodes, guiding your career to be more a specialist in one area, or you start turning your career to be more a generalist, if that leads you to different roles. And one of the examples that I think, for example, people that want to be involved in decision, like in management, for example, the kind of career that they want is to manage a team, manage a department, manage even a company. Like even roles like CTOs and stuff, they tend to be far more generalists than specialists. They need to know what is possible, what can be achieved, what is available to them, right? But at the same time, a generalist cannot create, sometimes, for example, we work with companies that are in R&D, in the scientific world, and in there they have very deep specialists in highly specialized areas as well that is very difficult to even recruit for. And those people are also very extremely valuable to the company. See what I'm saying?
I think going back to Sandro, I totally agree. By the way, that specialists are needed. In fact, in highly technical or highly specialized areas, innovation happens because people really, they live and breathe that discipline, right? What Jose was saying actually rings a bell, because it isn't. I think in the book Mastery, Robert Greene talks about this as well. Is that he talks about when you are trying to achieve mastery in a particular area, and mastery, I guess, I'm taking that almost synonymous towards kind of specialism, because you're trying to become a master in a particular discipline, in a particular area, right? And he talks about when you kind of are a practitioner, but then when you go towards that mastery of something, what these people normally do is that they have really internalized the discipline, but they then start crossing into neighboring disciplines so that they can bring knowledge from those neighboring disciplines to create new knowledge, right? So because that's what, when you become that master, you are creating knowledge, you're creating new knowledge. And that, you can't always think of it as, you have an epiphany and then suddenly something pops up. It's actually a combinatorial effect of your specialization in neighboring areas or areas that are complementary.
Yeah, I remember something along those lines. I don't know if it was in that book, but they said something along those lines. Like you reach, let's say, I don't remember where I read that, but like you reach, like say, 90% of competence in your core discipline. And some very successful people, the ones that create a lot of innovation in the world, they go to another discipline and they are able to reach like 70% of competence in that discipline. But the way that they get there, because of the knowledge that they're bringing from outside to the discipline that they are in, they have different insights or different ways of doing things, and that generates innovation. But I still like thinking on the no, go on.
Sorry, you brought out a point before, Sandro, that was if that attitude towards the learning, the generalist approach makes you better suited for specific roles or not. Like you talked about management and so on, and it's interesting because the more generalist you get, I feel like what that gives you is a systemic point of view, how everything fits together. And you need that visibility in order to perform well some of those roles that you mentioned, CTO, good management, that kind of stuff, right? And I feel like that is an important aspect. That is what we kind of strive for. And to some extent, the idea of, this impose expectations on developers, now that you were talking about that maybe are getting wider and wider, is because in order to, let's say, stay competitive today, it requires people to have that kind of awareness, and that is why some people are being kind of pushed to no, but you need to know a little bit about this, and you also need to know, because knowing that will give you that systemic point of view, and to some extent, that is very necessary. I would say it's necessary for everyone, whether you reach there on your own, in the sense of, you like exploring and you like, trying out new things and so on. That's kind of your driver. But it is essential, let's say, to be able to do a great job, not just good enough job, but a great job, And it's not that difficult, in my opinion. Like a lot of the times when you're trying to do something like this, like before we were talking about, stepping in or putting on different, hats and helping out. A lot of the times that's just, leading, for instance, right? And that requires certain degree of systemic view or understanding of how everything fits together, right? And that's an aspect that I feel like you're not gonna get that if you just look at your function, let's say, or your silo, no, so to speak. I don't know. It's just I feel like it's there. It's intrinsic. It will help you in that sense because it goes beyond just the the more skill or capability focused kind of thing, and it becomes more of an enabler for everything else. So it multiplies. Now, to some extent, it makes whatever it is that you're doing or that your team is doing be more than just the sum of the parts, right?
But there is for me like a difference between being aware of those things. For example, if you are a team member and you understand how other things in the system, and system as a not a system as a software, but like a whole organization, how everything fits together. So it helps you to position yourself. It helps you to place the kind of job that you are doing. It helps you to have the right connections and the right conversations and so on. But I also, going back to the beginning, is it realistic or is even healthy to expect that developers keep expanding their roles as they are? And a concrete example is with DevOps, right? So how many times we had, not only in our organization, but in outside, we've seen like both inside and outside, where when developers start trying to move more towards operation and do a lot of automation, and then when we actually saw a guy coming from sysadmin as a career and how they actually automate stuff, and you can see a huge difference. And this is true for all the other areas as well. For example, when we saw teams of developers, again, both internally, externally, we've seen both, right? So when they are managing their own project, and when you have a good agile delivery manager, how it changed. Because like we are asking the developers to do a lot of things that are outside their key area of expertise. And now I'm talking about disciplines that are a bit further away from their neighboring skills, right? So the further away that they go, the worse it gets for me, because they end up doing their best. They have the good attitude. They have the attitude of like, I'll do what it takes. If it's project management, if it's DevOps, if it's whatever else, I'll do what it needs. So it's a good attitude, but that doesn't mean that they do a good job at it. So as a strategy for the company, so even in the neighboring disciplines, for example, depending on the back-end, front-end discussion, the front-end world is quite complex today. It's very, so I mean, the skills that we have in certain technologies now, they are not always so compatible to how we do certain backend things. So, and those are neighboring skills. So, yeah, I wonder how healthy it is to push people to go broader and broader, and how realistic is to have a high expectation from people doing that.
Mm-hmm. I think part of this is related to skills, right? So, but part of this is related to you're doing this job and you have to do these jobs as well, right? And you are relying on the team so to do certain roles which are adopted by everybody in the team, right? So, and those roles get left behind because actually people, so for example, developers are often asked to do the project management side of things as well, because or analysis or QA, right? QA in particular, actually, it happens quite often. And because they are too concentrated on the development job, they kind of leave that behind. It's not always just related to the skill. It can be related to the fact that they have other full-time roles that they are performing. So there's this kind of role type dichotomy, I guess. So and it depends on the size of the team, the complexity of the thing, on whether you need individual roles in these areas, right?
So one thing on that, because is it the specialization, or is it that you are in a context, no, or an organization? Because you mentioned it, you said, like, is it healthy? Well, is it even, you know, good for the organization, and so on? And I feel like it's great to have that. You know, if you are open, you know, you're a specialist, but you're open to take other things, right? That's fine. The problem becomes when you're in a context where taking that other thing then becomes the new specialty, and that is unhealthy if you don't want that challenge, right? So the other day I actually answered a tweet. Someone was saying, have you ever been asked to do something that is completely outside of your skill set? You know, how did you deal with that, right? And my answer was yes, of course. I've been asked it. The way that I deal with that is I said, I'll do my best. Sometimes it went great. Sometimes it was good enough. But not having the skill was less important than whether I had an appetite for the challenge, right? And I think that again, it goes back to my point of attitude is everything there. No, if you are faced with having to, let's say, step out of that comfort zone and so on, and you want to do it, no, it's okay to try it, and it's okay. However, if that is forced, if you don't have the option, so if you're in a context that doesn't allow for, you know, for that, then it's unhealthy, and it's unhealthy because you are in an unhealthy context. You know what I mean? So there is that aspect as well of, it's not so much, you know, whether you decide to specialize with a good attitude or you want to be a generalist, is whether the context in which you are in is able to recognize when those things are happening and adapt, and I feel like the organization has a lot to do with that. Right, you can get really good people who are specialists who really want to get things done, and then they get burned out because, you know, I said yes once to do the infrastructure work, and now I am the infrastructure guy. This is not what I want to do with my career, right? And that is the unhealthy part to some extent there, right? There is that component that is not the individual but the context, and it's also very important.
I think that's a very good point. Is that, you know, when you are moving in areas where it's actually natural, because, you know, you're doing this job and that needs done, and you go there, but you're coming back to your own areas, and it's happening naturally. But then when you get stuck in a particular place, but then you are specializing in that, and you're not the right person to be doing it anyway, and you're doing it full time. But I think the other thing is, when certain roles are needed and people don't have the time on the slack, and that's what I was saying earlier, to actually be able to do it, like project management, like QA, those roles are needed, but they don't even have the time to be able to do that, but they're expected to do that. Is very unhealthy.
And by the way, this applies to our organization as well. You know, we didn't have agile. We didn't used to have agile delivery managers. Now we do, and we were able to compare, you know, someone who really likes doing that versus someone who's stepping in and doing the, you know, trying to move things forward and so on, right? And both are great. And the thing is, you shouldn't depend on that to, you know, just be the way to move forward, right? It should be something that allows you for that flexibility, you know, that stability in the system, that allows you to, you know, provide a baseline and move forward, no? But it shouldn't be the de facto way of working, no? Just expecting people to just, you know, step in and do it, and then do it perfect as well, right? Because that's the other thing, right? You still need to the work. You still need the work to come out, you know, in a you know, at a particular standard, no? So that's I think unhealthy on its own, and it's not so much related to the person, no?
Yeah. So are we? I don't know if I have critical distance to say what I'm going to say, because I think I'm too close to a developer. In my head, I'm still a developer, right? So I keep lying to myself to say that I'm still a developer. But It seems to me, again, it might be a very biased view here, but it seems to me that the expectation to do more than their core discipline is squarely on the developer. The developer is the one that everyone is trying to stretch. The business, the agile coaches say, no, you as a developer, you need to do far more. You need to do automation and testing and get involved with the business and so on and so forth. I don't see the coaches themselves saying, hey, we should learn programming. We should learn QA. I don't see the BAs saying, hey, the BAs should know how to code, how to do automation, or how to architect clouds. I don't see any other role that how can I say, that expectation of other members of the team to generalize as much as we have the expectation for developer. And this is why I was coming from, like, is this even healthy? Is this even the right thing to do? Because it seems a bit unbalanced.
No, I totally, yeah, seems a bit unbalanced. I totally agree. And I was like, while you were saying, I said, damn right, yeah, that is very true, that we ask, in terms of generalizing, we ask developers to do it much more than we ask others. And then I started thinking, well, why is that? There is one very simple reason. In every development team, there are far more developers than there is any other role. So if you've got a team of 5, normally you'd have 3 or 4 developers and on 1 or 2 other roles, right? Yeah. And so there is more capacity, or not capacity, scope for developers to be doing other things.
But I think that, like, this is a dangerous kind of role, because, like, what we also see, although it's true, normally the composition of a delivery team, let's say, would have far more developers than the other roles. You normally have 1 of each, or maximum 2, like if you have a QA or whatever. But we also see teams that are just developers. And we keep pushing the developers, pushing them to an extent as an organization to start removing the other roles and say, well, the developers can now do everything. And the developers themselves believe that. So I believe that.
Say that.
Right? So you know what? This whole agile thing is saying, cross-functional team, and we should do more and more. And I start liking that idea. So you know what? Like, yeah, I'll do whatever. Like, can I make the decisions as well? I'll be accountable, but can I also, right? So make decisions and stuff. So then you start to say, yeah, sure. You want me to do QA? We do, but then I will make my decisions. But the thing that then we see a lot of teams now, that they have a bunch of a group of developers, and they might have one product owner that is a bit remote. Sometimes we see product owners divided, one product owner across 3-4 teams, and that's it. The teams only have developers, right? So yeah, developers are doing everything. Well, and I generally believe that most developers, at least within the circles that we are, right? So within the context that we normally see ourselves in the craftsmanship and agile world, we see developers trying to do whatever it takes, right? So they have a good attitude in general. But then those teams are not performing well, because the expectation of developers will cover all these other areas. And with all the willingness in the world, they will not do a good job in quite a few of those areas that are not key to them.
I totally agree, by the way. And developers, as developers in our time when we were performing that role, I remember often having that attitude, like, we don't need this role, we don't need this role. Why we can do this, and often we think that we can do it, and we probably can, but not to the level that is done if a specialist is doing it, or they have enough time to do it, because that's what they are concentrating on, right? So I think, but here we are talking about specialisms in a way, right? And yes, we did talk about, I think the argument that, are these varieties of different roles needed in a team? Yes, they are. That's but
the roles or the skills, just to clarify, the roles or the skills?
The roles, and I guess the skills go along with the roles, right? So if those roles are needed, you need to have those skills for that underpin that role, right? So I think that's probably not up for debate, I guess, here, although we kind of made that, you need to be generalizing and you need to be looking at other things. I think coming back to whether we should have specialists or not, the fact that we are if we are expecting people to specialize in certain area but also generalize, we are not then saying that actually we can't have specialists in other roles, right? I think that's what we are saying is that people can generalize, and with developers as well, we are saying that they can, you want developers to specialize in the areas that that are technically difficult, and that's the kind of their core areas, and you want them to specialize, but you also want them to generalize. You also want them to be looking at other things, because I think taking the argument to the other extreme, where we are expecting developers to, in that extreme, we are expecting them to specialize in many things. We're not then asking them to generalize. We are asking them to be a developer specialist, but also a delivery manager specialist and a business analyst specialist. And I think that's the unhealthy thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, go on, Jose.
I do think that certain degree of generalization is important, and you need to perform at least good enough in some of the soft skills. I am not okay with someone being really, really good technically on something and then not being able to work with others, not be able to explain their ideas, not be like some of these things are you doesn't matter what function you are in, no, you need to have.
That's a very good point.
So for me, it's always T-shaped. It's more about the size, of the T, the cross thing, but you do need those things, and yeah, it's. So I don't completely agree. You know what I mean? Like you still need that.
I think metaphors fail in some ways as well. Actually, in my view, like there is a core set of disciplines that you need depth in. It's not just the general. You need depth in those disciplines, regardless of what role you're performing. So, effectiveness, teamwork, leadership, all those areas, you need depth in, right? And I guess when you're talking about specialism, just because you have depth in, being able to code really well in Java, doesn't mean that you don't need now the depth in being an effective team member. I think it's not the cross part that is part of your depth, and there is a commonality in that depth that needs to have to be there. And I'm not sure if we are talking exactly about that.
So for is it like in the how do you call it? You have the cross, and what do you call the one that goes
the
vertically?
Stem? No,
the stem.
The stem.
I don't know.
Let's use the stem for now. So, but for example, is it like maybe what you're saying, Mashooq? Is it like the for example, Jose mentioned how thick, let's say, the bar
is
the cross is, but maybe there is also the other one at the bottom, because like
how
those
thick
are
the stem is well.
Because it's the neighboring things. For example, if you specialize, let's say, in software development, right? You are a developer, but the context that you are in, you interact normally with people from other disciplines, from QA, from business analysis, for product and stuff. As part of your core discipline, as part of your specialization, there is a degree of the connection to the neighboring disciplines, which is part of your. I think that's interesting. So you have a specialization, but this specialization doesn't exist in isolation, right? It exists as part of a system. So as part of the specialization is also the connections that the specialization has with all the neighboring disciplines that you interact or whatever.
But then to your point, and now I'm being like I'm poking you, but to your point, then operations is a neighboring thing.
No, they are.
And and QA is a neighboring thing. Like
no,
you know what I mean? Like it's not exactly. Well,
but the
not
point that I
all.
was trying to make,
No, but
I think Sandro is talking more about the connections and not
it's the
true
connections.
specialization.
Exactly. So because this, I tried to make that point a little bit before. It was when I was saying, like, how far do we go? And that's when Mesh gave the example of the business analyst. Right. So for example, when you have a core discipline, but you need to interact with the surrounding disciplines within your team and context, department, and so on and so forth, like the depth is like you need to have enough knowledge on those neighboring disciplines so that you have a productive conversation. You can work together, you can understand what each other is saying, and you can plan together and create goals together, and so on and so forth. But there is. The question that I was asking is like, how far do we go? Do you go as far as moving away from your core discipline? So now that we are full-time performing a different discipline, and that's what I think the conversation was like. How far do we go? And for me, it's just enough for you to have a very productive relationship with all the neighboring disciplines within your context.
I think that's a separate point, though, that you need to have all those connections. But also, like, for example, when we look at our skills profiles internally, right, we have the 4 or 5 common disciplines for everybody, regardless of what role they're performing, right? Effectiveness, leadership, teamwork, those things, right? So, but they are skills. But that's what I meant. Actually, they are not the connections. They are part of your skill set, and that's what you go in depth in, as well as the technical depth that you have, or business analyst or DB manager depth, right? But there are certain things that are actually common across all roles that are not part of the cross part of your T. They are the stem of your T. That there you need to invest effort, time, and energy to build those skills in those areas to be an effective member of the team, regardless of what specialism you have.
Yeah, those ones are interesting because the ones that you mentioned, just for people that might be watching, because we mentioned some internal stuff, right? So we have like some core disciplines that we expect our consultants or cross people to have, and there is the technical side, which is just one, right? That's what you were saying, Max. So there is a technical side that might be software development, might be business analyst, might be agile delivery management. So those are core. That's what we call the technical discipline, given the different people we have. But then there are some common disciplines that we expect everyone to have. Leadership is one of them. The teamwork is another one of them. Effectiveness is someone being effective with the skills that they have. Because sometimes. And then there is a consultancy skills, because we are a consultancy company, and client engagement. Those are the normal, given out the business that we have. But those I wouldn't say non-technical. It's just how we see them now, because we call one technical. One of them is the technical one. All the other ones are common disciplines that we want across all the other ones, but they are not the core technical one, the one that you normally specialize.
One way, yeah, exactly. You can call them common and specialist disciplines. There are certain disciplines that are common across all roles, and then there is one or two special disciplines.
So this is interesting then. So because we end up doing that, but we never spoke about that. So wouldn't be the way, for example, when people are looking for cross-functional teams, have that distinction and say, look, if you want to make a high-performing cross-functional team, we need some areas of specialization, the specialist disciplines, as you were saying, Mash, but we need some common disciplines that are shared across the members of the team. And that could even be like agile processes, could be whatever else, right? So whatever that makes sense, or like the leadership or whatever that is, right? So but that's an interesting way of thinking about.
Well, that's how we think of it.
Yeah,
but I never kind of putting words to it, right?
Exactly. I never thought about that. Now I just now with this conversation that I actually understood that. Okay, that's interesting. So specialize or not specialize?
So I think the answer that for me, I can summarize from what I got from this talk is that you can specialize, but don't forget, your common disciplines as well. So that's one thing. So you need to have all those as well. And the second part is that when you actually start creating new knowledge, is that when you start getting a good level of expertise in neighboring areas that you can then combine to be more competitive, to be more effective, right? So I think those are the two kind of very interesting points that I got out of this.
Jose?
I think I'm in favor of generalization, and I feel like there's no specialization in the sense that you're always looking at other things, whether you recognize those are core or not. It's always happening, and it's very necessary. And if you're looking to develop your career, if you're looking to just let's say if your driver is learning, that's the way to go. You can still have areas that you develop more than others, but I wouldn't call that specialization, because for me it entails not looking out, and that's the part that I don't, let's say, agree with. Like, you're always looking out, and you should. If you're not, you should.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, like, I like the idea of still have fun, still like think about my career, the things that I really want to do, and where I really enjoy waking up every morning and doing the things that I want to do. But again, I also understand that we are in a professional environment, and as part there are. It's always nice when you achieve something with far more people, because like you normally like. The team success for me sometimes is more important, because like you don't tend to celebrate individual success, because if everyone fails, it doesn't matter if you scored the goal, right? So if the team lost, doesn't matter, right? But I like the idea of having a specialization, the things that you are really good at and it really gives you pleasure and you know that you bring a lot of value. But I think that value is accentuated far more when you are able to connect your area of specialization to all the neighboring skills and the wider ecosystem that you belong to. Then I think that when you really maximize the value that you bring as a professional to an organization, that's how I see that. And it also puts you in positions where you'll be more involved, if that's an area that you want to go, in decision making as well. Because quite often, although people bring the specialists to some decision making tables, let's say, the people making decisions, they are normally the generalists that understand the entire ecosystem and how each area of specializations fits together. And I like to have a seat on that table as well. So cool. Any final words? Well,
No.
Cool. So I would like to thank again Jürgen Desmet for the comments, and everyone else that added comments in there. As always, if you're enjoying those chats, and if you want us to cover something, leave us a comment, subscribe to the channel, put a thumbs up, and we will hopefully discuss your topic. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.